For those unlucky few, hair loss can affect us in many different ways, and the chances are if you're watching this, you've probably stopped to wonder if simply getting a transplant is the way to go. And the chances are you've maybe looked at all those clinic-sponsored case studies and thought to yourself, are they too good to be true? Especially if you're an average Joe, you've probably wondered if it's even achievable. After all, it's only Premiership footballers and wealthy celebs that get this kind of surgery, right? Welcome to the channel, my name's Paul, it's Six Nations Day, and here come my 10 most important considerations if you're thinking about getting an FUE hair transplant. For those of you who have been following my progress on YouTube, stay tuned because there will be a 6-month update at the end of the video so you can see what's been happening over the last few weeks. And for those of you who are new to the channel, feel free to subscribe, that way you can keep on top of my updates, my progress. And obviously if you enjoy the content, then feel free to give it a big thumbs up. That will help me in creating the content that you want to see. So obviously the other way of doing that is to put your own questions and queries into the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer those as they come in. So about 10 years ago I tried Minoxidil, which is basically the same stuff you get in Rogaine, and it was an accidental discovery when it was first produced because it was designed to combat blood pressure, and people found with extended use that the hair follicles were widening and they were producing thicker hair. But the problem with Minoxidil is it produces thicker hair all over the body, so these tiny little hairs that you can't actually see on my hand, all of a sudden I was starting to look like Grizzly Adams, you know, like a werewolf. So I didn't get on with Minoxidil. But it's worth trying Finasteride because that works differently. Because male pattern baldness comes from a hormone, a sex hormone called DHT, dihydrotestosterone, and that's what's responsible for constricting or miniaturizing your hair follicles to the point that they produce thinner and thinner hairs, and eventually don't produce any hairs at all. And the thing about Finasteride is it works as like an inhibitor to DHT. So the person who probably knows more about this than anything I've researched is a guy called Dr. Gary Linkov, and there's a link in the description to his YouTube channel and particularly his video that explains all this. So it's well worth taking a look and giving it a try for at least 6 months, especially if you're saving up for a hair transplant. You can try this first and see if it works for you. So that's my number 10. When it comes to appearances, one of the things I noticed throughout this whole process was, and I'll give you an example. I met a colleague recently at a meeting at work who I hadn't seen since pre-surgery, and apart from the usual pleasantries, he kind of looked at me like something was different, but it just went over his head and we just carried on chatting as normal. And similarly, when your wife, partner, girlfriend, whatever comes in from town and she goes ta-da like that, and you're like, shoes? No. Handbag? No. Nails? No. Hair? You know, we just don't apply that level of detail to other people's appearances. We sometimes look in the mirror and we notice a single hair that's out of place. And where I'm going with this is, you've got to be like completely and honestly 100% in why you're doing this. Are you really doing it because you're worried about what people think? Because I'll tell you what, those 4 little words have broken more dreams than anything else. What will people say? You know, they're 4 little words, and they're responsible for so many failed projects and failed, you know, ventures and so on. And really you just want to have a good sort of hard think to yourself, am I doing this for the right reasons? And that's one of the things I would like to think about or want you to consider, definitely. Your age is going to play a big part in this, because if you're in your early 20s and you're already showing some signs of serious recession, then you probably want to do one of 2 things. First thing is look at the family hairline, because if you're like me, I was receding quite early at the age of 16, 17, 18. And I've said in an earlier video, the barber was like, oh, you're going to be bald by the time you're 20. And but my family hairline has basically been like the dreaded M shape, you know. So you've got to sort of try and work out how far you're going to go. And basically what you don't want to do is you don't want to have a transplant at the age of 23 only for it to then continue to recede beyond the transplant, unless of course the preventative medication such as Finasteride is working well, etc. That's something you need to probably consider at this point. Real case studies as well, real case studies. I saw a lot of videos before I eventually went and got it done, and after I booked the surgery I did what most people probably did and just literally spent hours on YouTube sort of trying to get an idea of what to expect, etc. And I came across so many sponsored case studies. So they were like clinic sponsored case studies. You need to avoid them because the clinics aren't going to put negative cases on, you know, to showcase their procedures. So yeah, it's something to bear in mind when you're doing your research. Try and look at people who have done this and they're completely independent of any doctors, surgeons, clinics, etc. They're not being sponsored by anybody. You know, they're just basically telling you exactly how it is, basically like this video. Time off work, a lot of people don't really consider this in its entirety, because if you're in a sort of regular 9-to-5 job, you'll have a certain amount of annual leave allowance, you'll have sick leave if you can kind of wing it that way, depends on your sort of circumstances, I guess. But if you're self-employed, you lose money. You can't take holiday and without there being some kind of payback. You know, if you're self-employed, that might be a tricky one. Another thing that people, like in my job, sometimes we have to wear safety equipment as well. So we have to wear safety helmets, bump caps, etc. And I didn't even think about this. I thought 2 weeks off work would be fine. And then at the 2-week point, I'm thinking, oh my word, I have to wear a bump cap. How's that going to affect my, you know, it's going to be a little bit painful because everything was still a bit kind of, but then it turned out it was fairly numb anyway, so I was all right actually. But it's something you might want to think about before you do the procedure. Do you want 2 weeks off, or do you want to do it where you can actually take 3 or 4 weeks off, for example? And if you're self-employed, yeah, you might want to make sure you've got enough money to cover not only the procedure but also the time you're going to lose by not being able to do whatever it is you do when you're self-employed. So now we decide what surgical procedure we actually want, if we're going to go for the FUE or the FUT. Now there's a ton of videos online about this that you can, you probably, if you've got this far, you already know the difference between the two. So FUT would involve taking a strip from the back of the hair and then dicing that up into individual grafts and implanting those accordingly. Whereas FUE involves a electronic punch that takes from the donor area. And the main difference between the two is FUT, although it can cover a greater area, it leaves a significant scar, which isn't a problem unless you shave your head like I do. Well, I'll show you at the back anyway. You will see it quite visibly if you're shaving about number 2, number 1. Whereas the FUE, it leaves tiny little scars which are virtually unnoticeable. So that's something you might want to consider. And again, part of it will probably depend on how much hair loss you've already got and how much coverage you want from that hair loss. Okay, so I've mentioned this one on my first video, I believe, and this is all to do with your current state of health. So if you've got high blood pressure, there is a risk that on the day you go for the surgery, they might not be able to do it for you. I think it's if it's over 150. If it's under 150, I mean, I'll tell you now, I was quite, even though I didn't think I was, or showed it as such, I was quite nervous on the day, so my blood pressure was way up. And they measured it at the end and it was way down after it had all been finished. So yeah, that's something you might want to consider. If you're booking the surgery, say 6 months from now, you've got time to work on your fitness, give up smoking if you smoke, you know, and basically try and bring it down, because at the end of the day, there's nothing worse than waiting all that time to finally go and do something that is potentially life-changing, only to find the doctor or the surgeon's not going to do the procedure. So one to bear in mind, and a very good one to because all the research I did, nobody ever told me about that, so think about it. Expectations. Okay, so there are 2 parts to this. The first one being how much hair loss you've got. Bearing in mind the donor area, can yield potentially a maximum of about 6,000 to 6,500 grafts. Now, if you're going for 3,000, then there's a chance you can have a top up without over harvesting the donor area. And you can see some examples online of what over harvesting looks like, but you also have to get an idea of what those 3,000 are going to look like once they've been implanted. So if you follow my journey, and I suggest if you haven't at this stage, go back to my initial video and you'll see my time lapse and what my hair looked like before. I do post pictures of what my hair used to look like in pretty much all my videos anyway. So you can start to get a rough idea. Now, when the surgeon went to examine the grafts after they'd been removed from the donor area, a lot of my grafts were single hair, double hair. Okay, so I was below average. So you can sort of start to get a picture of what you can expect from 3,000 that I had, by a comparison, if you like. But I've seen some people, if they've got fair hair, the results don't work out too well. Some of them don't take properly. But yeah, you know, it's something something worth considering anyway, to manage your expectations. You're not going to suddenly have a great big mound of hair from nothing. At the end of the day, you're only borrowing from one place and putting it in another, so you've only got so many hairs that can cover a certain area. So bear that in mind, because as long as you're not expecting the moon on a stick, you shouldn't be too disappointed, providing you've set your datum appropriately, if that makes sense. So one of the things that affected my budget was the fact that every time I had the money available, or the financial ability to get this surgery done, I often found that there was something probably more deserving of that expenditure. So for example, getting the house painted, getting a new car, going on holiday. So for me, the pandemic was the real thing that made me sort of say, do you know what? My partner suggested, you know, when we got our refunds back from our holidays that we never took, she said, why don't you spend it on your hair transplant? Because you've mentioned it before. Why don't you, go ahead and do it? So I thought, you know what? Why not? That's what basically got me over the line. If you've put money aside specifically for that, then it shouldn't be a problem. But you also, one of the things you need to consider is basically how much you're going to spend on the procedure. So if you want a surgeon to do the whole lot, for example, it's going to cost upwards of £6,000. If you want to get it done in Turkey, it's going to cost upwards of about £1,300. And if you're going to get it done by technicians in the UK, you're probably talking maybe three grand upwards to get that done as well. So it's something to factor in, depending on what you want and how you want it and who you want it done by. So there are three things to think about there. And finally, research. There's no limit on the maximum amount of research you can do on this. You've got to do what you're happy with, because like I said before, it can be a potentially life-changing thing that you do if you decide to go for an FUE, FUT transplant. And there's no better place that I've found on the research side of things than the Hair Loss Experience Forum. So the website's here now, and the link is in the description. Have a look on there. There is literally so much information available on there. People that have been and done multiple procedures. I mean, we're talking not just FUE, but also FUT, also donor area from beard area. I mean, there's all types of people on there. Loads of good advice, loads of like what if threads. I was going to do a Q&A video for my 6-month point, but to be honest, I can just point you to that website. It's a British website as well. It's really well run. It's on Zenforo, and yeah, it's the place where I found most of my answers to my questions. It wasn't until I actually got the procedure done, though. I'd been lurking on the site for some time before I then registered and started posting these vids to maybe help other people with their journeys. But yeah, certainly when you look at people who have gone to Turkey and got their hair done there, people that have even gone further afield than Turkey, people that have got the old FUT procedure, the difference between the clinics, whether it's a surgeon or a technician, etc. There's literally loads of information on there, but do all your research, because the biggest problem I found with research in general is that you have to try and take some things with a pinch of salt. As I said a bit earlier, if you've got like a clinic sponsored advert, they're only going to tell you the best stuff that they want you to hear. Whereas if you go and get real life accounts from people, you know, real life people who contribute to these forums and so on, then you're going to get a more balanced view of what you're looking at. But the other problem I had with that was he would ask a question, put it into Google, and there'd be several different websites. So it's handy to have one place where you can go for all your information. And you know, if you can't find information, you just post a question, and someone will answer it within a few, you know, minutes, hours, whatever. So yeah, good luck. Hopefully that's helped a few of you. That's all my 10 major considerations that I would certainly look into before getting a transplant, or if I was considering it. So let me know how you get on, and if you've got any questions, as I said, drop them in the comments and I'll be happy to answer to the best I can. Okay, so you can see, looking at this, the hair is thickened up rather nicely at the 6-month point. I mean, there are a couple of areas that are still quite bare, but I mean, pulling the hair up, you can see underneath, if I just pull this back very slowly, the hair growth underneath is actually really good. I'm very impressed with, and I'll see if I can see the crown bit there at the top. That's starting to thicken up as well, although that will take longer. So yeah, I mean, it's again, if I just pull the hair at the top here, you can see there are areas that are still a bit bare, but actually, you know what, for 6 months, consider it's supposed to be about 60%, 50% coverage, it's not too bad. So if we go round to the back now, and I'll see if I can, no, I can't really zoom in on that, but yeah, obviously I've coloured the hair as well, so you can see it's not quite worked at the back for some reason. I've no idea what that is. Maybe it's, I mean, the light is different, but yeah, it's not looking too bad at all. Not looking too bad at all. So yeah, that's my 6-month update. The numbness on the scalp, not really feeling anything now. It doesn't feel like I'm brushing someone else's hair anymore. And there's no irritation at all at the back. Every now and again I get a bit of itching at the sides, but I think maybe that's new hair continuing to push through. But you know, it's actually going really well. I couldn't have asked for more. You know, I didn't have the greatest expectations, so that's probably a good thing, because as I said in my, you know, 10 points to consider, measure your expectations and get them right, and you should end up feeling, you know, pretty positive about it all, to be fair. So I'll keep you posted, and yeah, any questions, like I say, you can see directly under the light now. Yeah, you know, it's really getting there. It's really getting there. Well, that's it for this time, and thank you very much for watching. Hopefully, if you decide to go down this route, you'll end up with a fantastic new hairline, and everything will work out well for you, as long as you manage your expectations, and as long as you understand exactly what's going to happen, then you shouldn't be too disappointed. So thanks again for all your support, and keep watching, keep looking out for the videos, and feel free to go back through any of my old videos, ask any questions you want to ask. I'm here basically to help you decide what's best for your hair, and look forward to hearing from you, and look forward to the next video, which I'll post as soon as I've got more info for you. Take care.